This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Mathews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I am super excited today. I want to introduce the guest we have today. She was a stay-at-home mom for 17 years who joined into tech in her late 40s with zero experience in Silicon Valley. She's helped SaaS startups find opportunities to break new ground and make things grow. 5-time sales leader, has been part of 3 successful exit. I think one of those you just did like rather recently. She's led sales functions at HelloSign, Dropbox, and Skillsoft. The CEO and founder at Elizabeth Andrew Consulting. And Elizabeth Andrew, welcome.
Thank you so much, Wesley. It's great to be here and super excited for the conversation today.
Well, I'm super excited to meet you. And one thing is, I think this is the first podcast. I shaved my beard. Maybe when I first talked to you, I had a big burly beard, but I ended up shaving it. But I got to ask you a question. I ask everybody the question that comes on the podcast because I think it's a really important one. You have a really great wealth of experience, like from being a mom from Silicon Valley tech startup, launching your own company, selling that to where you're at today. What's one of the most important lessons you've learned thus far being an entrepreneur?
I would say the most important lesson is anything is possible. Literally anything is possible. And this is such a time in the world where I think a lot of people are going through a lot of things. And, I certainly have a lot of incredible colleagues who've lost jobs or whatnot over the last year in tech. And, just don't give up because if I can do it, anybody can do it.
So I want to start back. The first bullet point is really, it's a lot. It's a stay-at-home mom for 17 years, joined a tech company in her late 40s with no experience in Silicon Valley. So talk about that, being a mom. Like, what led you to get back out there and join tech in Silicon Valley? It's a big jump.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I have a very unusual background for tech. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I actually started out in the investment industry in my 20s and 30s in the mutual fund space. And I was at Franklin Funds and then Wells Fargo Asset Management. I helped Wells Fargo build their very first mutual fund company because the Glass-Steagall Act had lifted. So banks were able to sell investment products. And we took that, a team of 4 of us, the founding team of 4 of us, took it from zero to over $1 billion in assets.
Wow.
For Wells Fargo. And the last region we went into as an investment firm was the Northeast because that's kind of the mutual fund and investment capital of the world. And so they asked me to go open up that region. And I did. I moved out. I think I was in my late 20s and I moved out. My family said, go for 2 years, have a great time, don't fall in love. And, I moved to Boston and I know you're in Michigan, as a California girl in January, had never lived in the Northeast or anywhere where it snowed that much. And I was calling on stockbrokers, and this is back when carrying a bag was carrying a bag. And, it was fun. I took that region from 0 to 70 million in sales after a couple of years of mutual fund wholesaling out there. I didn't listen to my parents, as most young kids do, and ended up getting married to a New Yorker and moved down to New York and spent 17 years as a stay-at-home mom in the Connecticut area. And it was great. I had a really interesting time. I did a ton of nonprofit during that time. I spent 17 years working on nonprofit organizations, and it was an interesting place to do that too because they were mostly women that were stay-at-home moms that were contributing to nonprofits, and most had come out of big careers. A lot of the things I did in those years were harder than anything I've done professionally.
Really?
But it's not until you take all of that off your resume that anybody will pay any attention to you because they don't take it seriously, right? So, but you're dealing with volunteers. You can't fire them if they don't do their job, and it can be challenging doing nonprofit work. But in 2011. We decided to move back to California and moved to San Francisco. My kids were getting a little older. My oldest was starting in high school. And so, I felt like it was time to get back to work. And I was completely unemployable. Nobody would hire me. And, I'd spent 20 years on the East Coast, 17 out of the workforce, a totally different um, part of the world. And, I'd lost a lot of my connections. My childhood connections were, of course, still there, but, most of them were in the suburbs and married and having families. And so I had to start from the ground up. And I found my very first job on Craigslist,
Wow.
working for Putnam Investments for the West Region Director of Sales, and it was kind of a sales enablement role, a lot of admin kind of stuff, which is not my strength, but got me back into the workforce. And I did that for about a year and just felt like there's no fun to be had in financial services anymore. So much happening in San Francisco and tech at the time. And so I said, as long as I'm reinventing myself, I may as well try tech.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say,
I
so you're
did.
talking like 2011. So like Facebook came out what, like 07, 08. The iPhone came out around the same time. So like Silicon Valley is just sort of carving its little space on the map at this time, right?
Absolutely, and it was very different. I think today, being in the space and certainly post-pandemic, people are a lot more open to career breaks. People are a lot
Yeah.
more open to people working remotely and all those things. But in 2011, it was an old boys club. And
Yeah.
I actually joke with a lot of my friends, when I was in the investment industry and I was giving a presentation for 500 Merrill Lynch brokers and in downtown Boston, I was the only woman in the room. They were
Wow.
all white men that looked like my dad. And then I move into tech and I'm the oldest person in the room. So there's a lot more diversity, but there's a lot of ageism and whatnot. There most of my CEOs and bosses over the course of the last decade plus have been younger than me substantially. And so
No, it's
it's
great. I
been
mean, I think
fun.
for you to come off of 17 years and want to get back in the workforce, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of anxiety or like, but you like have no tech experience in Silicon Valley where like tech is, the birthing of all these great companies. Like, what led you to
Right.
that? Like, did you just wake up one day and you're like, huh, this is a really big uphill bat? Like, what led you down that path? It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I said I got that first job on Craigslist. That was my first job with benefits and everything. I did some kind of temp work and I was trying. It wasn't easy. I was trying to get back in, and so once I landed that job, I was in the city and you feel the energy, at that time in the city. I mean, San Francisco was a fun place. There was a lot going on. It was very youthful. It was a lot happening. And I knew if I were to stay in the investment industry, not only has it become so regulated and so different than it was 20 years ago, I'd have to resit for all my licenses and so many of the jobs that I would want to do in sales and go to market are on the East Coast, and I didn't want to move back to the East Coast, and it just felt like a good thing to do. And in my early career, I had done inside sales, external sales, sales training and development, sales leadership. I found my first job in tech and sales ops, working for a healthcare tech company, and I know they hired me for my sales enablement experience, and I was the only person at that company that didn't come from healthcare, um, and, it was fascinating. I was employee number 29 there, and, the biggest reason people don't hire people for a career break is they think they're out of touch with
Yeah.
the tools and whatnot, right? So, one of the first things I did is I went to the Salesforce conference that happens in San Francisco. There were 150,000 people. It's Dreamforce.
Wow.
And I literally parked myself at the Genius Bar and learned everything I could and demoed every product on the expo floor. And I was just a sponge that year and in that sales ops role. And um, unfortunately, like a lot of startups, after a year, they ran out of funding and went bankrupt. And so I found myself in a job search. But at this point, I had already broken the barrier getting into tech, right? And so I was able to find an IC role just and a sales role working for HelloSign. And I spent 4.5 years there. So that was a great run. We were acquired by Dropbox. I moved into leadership. I was probably employee number 40 at HelloSign. And the VP of sales who hired me knew that I was very different than a lot of the people on the floor, a lot of SaaS sales dudes and whatnot, all very good friends of mine, really great people. And, I learned a lot from them and hope I was able to teach a thing or two, coming more from the enterprise relationship building carrying a bag kind of sales approach to them. And but the VP of sales recognized I had a lot of experience, so he let me represent sales in the weekly marketing meetings. I learned everything about the funnel, and I worked with the product team to help prioritize requests that were coming in for product roadmap. And so I got a lot of experience cross-functionally, and then moved into leadership. And so that was a really great run, 4.5 years there. And after we were acquired by Dropbox in, gosh, I want to say it was February of 2019. And, as happens after an acquisition, people peel off and the VP of sales left. And then I was running pretty much the whole sales organization, reporting to our COO, Whit Balk, who had come from Box, and did that for about a year. And then just felt like, once you're, the integration into Dropbox, which was super fun. I mean, that Dropbox was very kind of typical tech culture, with the Michelin star chef, 3 meals a day, and all the things, and so that was kind of fun. And then, but I'm a mom. I like wearing a lot of hats. I'm good in the startup space. I like building. I like growing. I like solving problems.
Is it chaotic?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Implementing, process, and that's kind of what I'm skilled at is that stage. So I ended up leaving and going to a very, very early stage startup, and in March of 2020. That didn't work out too well, but right at the pandemic, and then I found another company called Pluma, which was another really fun run. I was there for a year. The VP of sales, the CEO was incredible, very, very smart. Yale undergrad, Harvard MBA, and she hired me in December of 2020. She offered me the job, and I started an hour later because she was leaving in three weeks for maternity leave. And she came back in mid-January and said, "I just had this beautiful baby. I don't want to work 100 hours a week as a founder anymore. I want to sell the company." And so I had only been there about 5 weeks, and so I was disappointed in that. But it was actually a great, great experience. We had 20 people in the U.S. 12 of them worked for me in sales. We had no marketing, no SDR team. We took it from 4 million to about 11 million in a year. And
wow, in 1 year, fast growth.
Yeah, 100% outbound enterprise.
Nice.
But and we ended up getting acquired by Skillsoft. But that was a great, great experience for me too, because I was, along with the CEO and the CTO, it was the three of us on the leadership team. And so I was involved in the due diligence for the acquisition, which I had not been at HelloSign, because you've got to be senior leadership. Those things can be very quiet. And so that was interesting.
It's got to be cool to experience that time in Silicon Valley, because, me being in Michigan, I can only fantasize what that time was. But I just imagine a lot of people, a lot of kind of like trading cards, like people jumping ship, getting poached, and so many, to your comment around that company went bust or they ran out of funding. I mean, it was every company there just getting pumped full of rounds of money. And I mean, was there any bootstrapped entrepreneurial companies that came out of there that didn't take a bunch of seed money, or anything out of that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, well, so HelloSign was a Y Combinator company. So was Dropbox. So once we were acquired, it's interesting when you come out of Y Combinator, which is sort of the elite accelerator for early stage startups. So you see that there is somewhat of a formula that works. And, so I worked for 3 Y Combinator companies. So that was a great education. We did get our Series B. I mean, Joseph Walla, who was the CEO of HelloSign, and Neil O'Mara, the CTO, and Whit Balk, who was the COO. I learned a lot about what to do, right? They did get funding, but they were very conservative in how they spent it. We were a frugal startup. We weren't doing the
1 Michelin star versus 3.
I remember, God, I have a photo of it somewhere, of our CEO, Joseph Walla, when we were in this. We moved offices a few times, and this is shortly before I started, after I started. So I was, again, I was employee 40, 45, somewhere in there. And we got one of those refrigerators for the office, where you can actually have drinks in there. And I have a picture of him looking at this refrigerator. It was like, "Oh my god, we've gotten a
Yeah.
refrigerator," just so that we can have drinks. It was,
Nice.
uh, so, it was fun, the ping pong and all of those things, and, we had a good culture. I think when you talk about Silicon Valley and the energy there, what sticks out to me the most is the caliber of the talent. It's unmatchable, and, I like working remote. I was a field salesperson when I was wholesaling back in the day, so I know how to be effective working remotely, but, it's I learned I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had that experience of
Mm.
working in the San Francisco area during that time period because it's a lot of like, HelloSign was engineering-based e-signature company, and a lot of the conversations, we'd go out and we'd pick up a salad at lunch, and you're sitting at the little picnic table in the office next to
Yep.
engineers and having conversations and talking about getting into conversation. I mean, we were e-signature APIs, but talking about, the moral decisions that engineers have to make when they're programming cars and, just having the experience of being surrounded by that caliber of talent and learning and growing and sitting side by side. I didn't even know what an API was when I started at HelloSign and, just pulling engineers into my sales calls and sitting with them and learning and, I learned how to do, a few calls, and whatnot as a coder, but nothing crazy. But, the caliber of the talent is really what is unmatchable
Is that wave
in
still
the Bay
there, or
Area.
is it just the landscape completely different now?
So I moved down to San Diego, I think I shared with you last October, but I think it's still there. And,
Really?
post-pandemic, a lot of people left. But post-pandemic, I was going to some in-person events that were much more intimate, like a couple of founders I would have. You have more access to founders that are still there. I think a lot of the people who are left were probably younger people who were renting, and it's a very expensive place to live and realized they could live at Tahoe and still do their job, or go back home to
Yeah.
Michigan and still do their job, right? So it kind of left a pool of founders. I
Yeah.
mean, I know a lot of pretty incredible founders. There's also one thing that I'm seeing in the Bay Area is, and it's actually not even so much down in the Silicon Valley or in the financial district or in south of Market. I think it's kind of in the Hayes Valley area. There's popping up the whole kind of AI
Yeah.
home spot,
That's
and
the next, yeah.
just and you cannot replace in-person meetings,
Yeah.
and like going to coffee with friends of mine who are AI founders that work down there, and I worked for an AI company. I was VP of sales for an AI company for a year, and, it's, um, going to the after hours talks and things and getting invited to these little dinners for AI companies and thought leaders, and, you learn a lot there, and, I do think places like Austin and Phoenix, and I'm even seeing a little bit of San Diego. There's a founder community down here that I've really been tapping into and having fun. I think it's become more and more um, entrepreneurial down here. From everything I'm hearing since I've been here in October, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Not the same.
It's funny, a realtor friend of mine, there's like a subdivision a mile or so for me, and it's in a gated community. He said that he had a couple come from Silicon Valley, like she had family here, he could work remote, and they were looking at this house. It's probably like 1.5 million, and they didn't realize that it had a basement, and the basement was like 3,000 square feet. And then they saw the price of the house, and they thought he was lying, and they're like, we could probably take 2 or 3 of these houses. Just the value of homes in Michigan relative to what they were talking about in San Francisco was just
Yeah.
jaw-dropping. Um,
Yeah.
Come here and live like a king. But that's
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, like, thinking about that moment in time, like, you had mentioned that you just sold your last company. You're coming out of a sale. Like, how did that come about? So you work for um, Hello Sign, and then that transitions, and at what point do you say, "Hey, like, I wanna do my own thing?" Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I left HelloSign in, I think it was February of 2020, and, I went on to, be the VP of sales for, uh, that early stage startup that failed, and that was a legal tech company. It was just too early. I went and worked for, Pluma that was acquired by Skillsoft, and I learned more in that year than I learned in 4.5 years at HelloSign. I mean, it was just an incredible experience, and I'd still be there if we hadn't sold. But then I was at Skillsoft, which is, a big company once again, and, I got recruited to become the VP of sales of this AI company, Natomi, and so I went over there and I worked there for a year, and, I found myself working 80 hours a week, and I had 3 days off, and, I just kind of felt like this is too much. So at the end of 2023, I decided that I wanted to go off and do my own thing, and so I started doing the consulting a little bit, and, I was working with, the thought leader, Scott Leese, if you know who he is, on kind of coming up with multiple sources of income and, you know, becoming unplugged and untethered, as you would call it, right? And so I guess it was February or March of 2023 that, there was a CEO out of New York who, in 2020, he lost his director of sales, and he ended up with his whole sales team reporting to him. And so he built this Slack app to help him manage his team
Hmm.
and keep them engaged. And it saved him 10 to 15 hours a week. And it increased their activity. And so he came looking, he just organically put it out there and got some customers. And he was using it. He built it for himself. And so he came looking for a co-founder last year, and we were connected. And I just loved the product. I love the idea of the product. I'm a mom. I have 3 adult kids. My oldest is an SDR, and he works in the office 3 days a week, but I see, like, a lot of his friends, this remote work, I believe in it, it's great, but when you've come out of school post 2020 and you've never worked, you've gotta have a lot of motivation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And my son knows himself well enough, he, he's in the Bay Area, which is great, he'd love to move down here to San Diego. It's one of my other kids is down here too, but he knows he can't work remote. He'll be surfing and, playing video games.
I don't blame him.
You have to have a certain work ethic,
Yeah.
right? And so the whole idea of this product that we built or that my co-founder built really was, to help team engagement that is remote and hybrid. And, but the way the tech market has gone in the last year and a half, I didn't want to get funding. We were bootstrapped. I did not want to get funding because I know too well how having investors changes
Yeah, I was gonna
expectations.
ask, like,
And
what specifically with that? Is it private equity or, like, new management teams come in and just change that culture? Like, what's
yeah, I mean, as a VP of sales now for multiple times, right, you're involved in board meetings and whatnot. And so, I've had to report on revenue and all of that to high profiles, VCs. And, um, I just know the expectations are different, and it just changes. In fact, that very first tech company that I worked for when I was RevOps, I I mean, I wasn't on the leadership team, so I can't speak to it. We had a $14 million raise and ran out of money,
wow.
but pre-revenue. But I from my observing, I mean, I think one of the problems is the BCs there. I mean, I could see the leadership team spending a week a month creating reports for the investors,
Wow.
and that's time when you're not building the company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what do you, like, how does a company burn through 14 million of funding? Like, where do you see most of the waste going?
Yeah, I mean and that was a lesson to me. I have this philosophy, Wes, where literally, like, but even before I was a CEO, I'm the CEO of my own life. right? You want to bring in more than you spend,
Hmm.
right? You've got to manage responsibly. And this company was there was a 14 million raise. It was pre-revenue. There was no revenue, and we had a beautiful office space in the Embarcadero.
Which is, doesn't sound cheap. Doesn't sound cheap either.
At that time, no, and it was just me and the office manager because the CEO and the chief sales officer were traveling around, to visit potential customers most of the time, and that was wasteful, right? There was just flying here and flying there for meetings that probably could have been virtual, and
Yeah.
there was a big high spend.
So fast forward to like where you're at today, like your consulting company. Are you focused more on enterprise level companies like in the Bay Area? I mean, do you cling on to entrepreneurs, or what's sort of where do you like to spend the majority of your time?
Yeah, well, so good question because I've done a lot of enterprise sales in my career, right?
Hmm.
But really, where my expertise is building, and so where I've found my niche, and I think really what makes a lot of co-founders, a lot of startups fail, is sales, right? And one of the biggest mistakes, and this is the interesting thing too. I've worked for many CEOs who are very, very smart. They're coming out of the top schools, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Cal. They all come, not all of them, but many of them come from the technical and product side. They all think the product is going to sell itself. It never does,
Yeah.
and this is a generalization, but many of them don't respect the sales function. They don't, they're kind of allergic to
Yeah.
technical people. I mean, I've sold to developers and engineers,
Right.
by nature, they're allergic to salespeople, right? So it's very different kind of leadership, right? And so a lot of these founders might be very good at selling the product themselves, but their biggest mistake is their early sales hires. They either hire a VP too soon, thinking they can just scale it. They hire, or they hire early stage salespeople who, don't know how to sell. And so, really, what I'm doing is I'm trying to help these founders who are doing. They have to have founder-led sales. I won't work with anybody who hasn't at least sold 5 or 10 deals on their own. So. But so they know it works, but they can't get it out of their head into a process to make it scalable.
Is it because like that's not like I look at, so I'm an entrepreneur, strip me down, I'm an entrepreneur, but I've been on this kick around, what's the top 3 things that you're best in the world at? So are you referencing
Right.
that they're just not best in the world at sales, they're best being tech and product? And just get
Yeah.
them focused on there? Because I think as a founder, you're wearing a lot of hats, right? And
Yeah.
if you're on the tech, you're on product, you're on sales, and yeah, tech and
Yep.
sales are, to me, 2 very, very different things.
Right. And even if they are good at sales, I mean, and some of them are very, very good at sales, they can't sell all the time. Like
Right.
if they want to grow the business,
Yep.
they've got to duplicate themselves.
I'm stuck in that right now myself on the second company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to help you. We could talk about that, but
That's great. Like that's a very specific thing, a very specific gap that you're filling. So what does that look like? Like how do you now get into a room with a CEO to make them realize like they're the problem and they need to get out of the way? And because I would imagine that they have to be in a position of like, I'll listen. I know that I'm the bottleneck, I'm the problem, and I'm ready to make a change. Yeah,
yes. And they do. I mean, they come to me typically,
that's
right?
awesome.
They know, and I'll go where I'm getting most of my opportunities. Although a lot of my opportunities are coming from a few VCs that I know that have portfolio companies that need help. So that's been a good funnel for me. But I'm finding, ironically, I have had some interesting experiences recently. I had a chance to go to Necker Island with 30 entrepreneurs
Oh,
and
nice.
Richard Branson, which was really a very, very cool experience. But I met, a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've found a few people like yourself, that, I mean, business owners in different areas that are having that problem. And so there's one person I'm working with who, I'm helping her build her playbooks and everything, and she runs a publishing company, and another person that runs a marketing company. So I'm learning that actually this wasn't, I was thinking it was just tech companies, but I'm finding small business owners or mid-sized business owners are needing help building their infrastructure. And what I do is I come in and I'll do an audit, and I audit the people, the processes, and the positioning. And, there's a lot of areas that fall under that, and so I identify where the weaknesses are, and, some companies, they've never had sales function,
Yeah.
some people, and I help them identify what their ideal customer profile is, what their elevator pitch is, and then I can come in and I can put sales processes in and evaluate their tools and how they're outreaching and, sequences and so many areas.
What do you feel the biggest objection is, like, for a CEO that, like, you're like, they need the help, but they just can't get out of their own way? Or is it just sound too overwhelming? Or does it take a lot of work on the founder or CEO to, like, actually make that shift where they're just scared, or, it's just too comfortable where they're at and they just don't want to invest the time and effort?
Yeah, I mean, they have to want to grow. Usually it's like they just haven't been able to, and they need help. And usually the ones that come to me, they may have had a couple of bad sales hires, like a sales leader, and they're afraid to make the commitment
Mm,
again, right? So what they can do is they can de-risk that by hiring me. And I come in, I usually typically have a minimum of a 3 to 6 month um, engagement with them. And, and so then I can come in and I can do the whole evaluation as almost kind of, I give them that high quality growth expertise without the commitment. It's like almost like fractional CRO work.
yeah.
And I could do that as well. But, the difference between consulting and fractional CROs, fractional CRO typically comes in for a fixed amount of time working full time as a CRO. And
Yep.
I can certainly do that too. But, what I'm doing is really kind of more on a go-to-market consulting and advising capacity where, I can help them build the infrastructure and the foundation to scale the organization without having the commitment.
Are you like, are you blown away sometimes when you, like, take a peek under to see what companies are working with and how they've gotten to a certain point, like, without structure, without process? I mean, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, like some companies that are a million. I've got a couple like at 80 million, and there's like zero processes in place. And, they're like, all right, we're ready to, put these things
Yeah.
into place. It's like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's an ideal situation. That is a slam dunk for me to come into companies like that. I was just talking to a CEO who's got 25 million in revenue, and wants to scale, and that's perfect for me. Where it becomes a little more challenging is, and this tends to be more the tech founders where they haven't really had a lot of success on their own. And they want you to come in, they might be sub 100,000 in
Oh,
sales,
wow.
and they want you to come in. They won't, they're looking for the magic bullet.
Yeah.
They're looking to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and I get people reaching out to me every week. These, leading CEOs from AI companies that like, can I just pick your brain, And I'm like, sure, I'm happy to do some consulting for you. And they're like, well, we don't have any money. We just want to know how to do founder-led sales. I'm like, well, good luck with that.
Uh, so in terms of like, so in AI, like what do you see in like the next 12 months? Like if you're a small business, like what should you be thinking about? Is there certain things you should be reading, researching? Because it's so overwhelming right now. There's so much information. Companies are popping up overnight. You know, do you have any like great experience share advice for small businesses on how they can start to like think about AI logically for their business?
So, yes and no. I know the space very well. I have some very, very close friends who are CEOs that I respect to the end of the earth of AI companies that I, talk to regularly. I believe wholeheartedly that, companies need to adopt AI or they're going to be irrelevant. It needs to augment your functions in order to help you grow faster. At the other end of it is I left AI in the end of December of 2023, so a year and a half ago. It is light years different.
Well,
ChatGPT came out right after I left, right? So I use it all the time, but you should be using it, but it's changed. It's like,
what's crazy is somebody asked me the other day, they're like, "Hey, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask you this, but like, what does ChatGPT even do, and how do you use it?" And today, actually, I had somebody that wanted me to sign an NDA, and it was like 14 pages long. So I just copy paste, put it in there, and asked, like, "Is there anything I should be worried about?" Like, it's got all my information from the conversations I've had, and it's like, it brought up 2 points that
right.
you may want to get this in front of your lawyer, but it's very generic. And, I kinda trust it, like, so it's just interesting
Yeah.
that and it does so much more. I mean, I know the imaging and Canva and all these other it's still a little off, right? Like, you ask it to do something,
Yeah.
it'll add, like, 8 fingers and misspell words, but it's pretty scary right now, like, what you can produce, and the information you can get. So, like, what type of opportunities are good for you? So, like, if there's anybody out there listening that's like, yeah, I mean, from my experience, entrepreneurial focus, I don't really spend any time in enterprise. It just doesn't interest me.
Mhm.
But my entrepreneurial sphere of influence, it's always sales challenges. Like, that's never ending. There's always something. Um, how
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's having any challenges with sales, I mean, I'm happy to have a conversation. I have a website. Actually, I have a giveaway, a freebie on my website. I just launched my website because I'm now full-time entrepreneur now for the last 2 months since selling Sales Can Beat, right? So I'm going at this full time. So I just
Nice.
launched my website, and I have a free sales playbook template.
Sweet.
It's pretty high level, but I really think it's helpful for um, small business owners or founders that kind of want to think through like what are their product offerings, what is the low hanging fruit for their target profile that they're going after. And, it can kind of walk you through some of the basics there. It's pretty high level, but you could certainly go to my website and schedule time for a consultation or a conversation. I'm happy to talk to people. The website is elizabethandrew.com, no S. So
Mhm.
elizabethandrew.com. And yeah,
That's awesome. I did download your the download, and it is super helpful. It makes you think, right? And I think that's as an entrepreneur, like, you just have to think, challenge yourself, work on the business, pull yourself out, bring in experts. You have a wealth of knowledge, and I mean, the SaaS, a reoccurring revenue model, like, all those things are really important for entrepreneurial companies. Is that the
right.
easiest way for people to get a hold of you? Is the elizabethandrew.com, LinkedIn, anything like that?
I'm also on LinkedIn. It's actually Elizabeth A. Andrew. So two A's there or you could just Google Elizabeth Andrew on there, but the actual URL is Elizabeth A. Andrew
Elizabeth
on
A. Andrew.
LinkedIn.
Yep.
But yeah, and I have a few offerings too. I mean, depending on where people are, I do sales consulting where I can come in for a minimum of a 3 to 6 month engagement, and I go all in and I audit and and if you're hiring a VP of sales, it can be 4 to 500,000 a year to hire a VP of sales, right? So
Is that something you'll
it's a
help out
fraction.
with? Will you help the founder, the CEO, write the job description, find the right type of person?
Absolutely, I
Yeah.
help with hiring, and I don't charge 4 or 500,000 to
Right.
do that.
Right.
It's a much smaller
Yeah.
commitment. If I'm doing full consulting. But there's some companies that maybe are afraid to commit to that, and I could do more of a coaching for the CEO
Yeah.
and coaching them, and make it an hour call a week, or I can do advising. I do advise some companies and.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Elizabeth, I really appreciate your time. You got a great story, a lot of experience. And again, elizabethandrew.com. Download the free guide. I did. It's great. It gives you a lot to think about. And if you're looking for, if you have sales challenges or need to kind of clear your head as an entrepreneur, Elizabeth Andrews is a great resource to do that. So thank you so much for the time and coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to connect again. And
Awesome.
yeah,
All right.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.